1998 was a bloodbath. 13 major Hollywood films combined for over $1 billion in losses, and I'm not exaggerating that number. I've got Kevin Costner here. I've got Brad Pitt, Eddie Murphy, Oprah Winfrey, and a studio that somehow released 5 massive bombs in a single year. There's a film where thousands of people bought tickets just to watch a 2-minute trailer and then walked out before the movie started. And one disaster so perfectly ironic, it accidentally destroyed a Hollywood tradition that had existed for 30 years. Which one lost the most? Let's find out. Here's a movie with perhaps the greatest irony in cinema history, an Alan Smithee film, Burn, Hollywood. Burn was a satire about a director who wants to remove his name from a terrible movie but can't because Alan Smithee is Hollywood's official pseudonym for directors who disown their work. You'd think the filmmakers would nail the comedy? They didn't. The budget was $10 million. It made $52,850. That's thousand, not million. One of the worst theatrical releases ever recorded. Here's where it gets wild, though. Director Arthur Hiller hated what writer Joe Eszterhas did to his cut so much that he petitioned the Directors Guild to remove his name. They granted it. The director credit on this movie, about a director who can't remove his name, literally reads Alan Smithee. Eszterhas responded by telling Hiller he should kiss my A in Times Square for saving this film. Roger Ebert gave it 0 stars, calling it spectacularly bad, incompetent, unfunny. It won 5 Razzies. The negative publicity was so severe that in 2000, the DGA officially retired the Alan Smithee pseudonym forever. This movie was so bad, it killed the very concept it was satirizing. Eszterhas never wrote another major Hollywood film. That's poetic justice. MGM wanted a franchise. The original Species made $113 million on a $35 million budget in 1995. So they fast-tracked Species 2 with the same budget expecting similar returns. They got a catastrophe instead. Species 2 cost $35 million. It grossed around $27 million worldwide. MGM wasn't just losing money on this one film. They were staring at a $53.6 million quarterly write-down so severe that majority shareholder Kirk Kerkorian had to inject $500 million in cash to keep the studio operational. The production was a disaster from day one. Legendary artist H.R. Giger, who designed the original creature, was reduced to making other people's designs look Giger-esque. When his creative input was ignored, Giger started sending grotesque drawings to production offices depicting the alien creature tearing a man to shreds. The man in those drawings was clearly meant to represent producer Frank Mancuso Jr. Giger demanded his name be removed from the picture entirely. Director Peter Medak's DVD commentary opens with him saying, "I directed this thing called Species 2, and then proceeds to trash his own film for 90 minutes. Michael Madsen later summarized it perfectly. Species 2 was a crock of shit. The film wasn't screened for critics. It was dead on arrival. Peter Berg was an actor on Chicago Hope when he wrote and directed Very Bad Things, a pitch-black comedy about a bachelor party gone catastrophically wrong. He assembled a genuinely impressive cast. Cameron Diaz was the hottest star in Hollywood after There's Something About Mary. Christian Slater, Jon Favreau, Jeremy Piven, all signed on. Budget was $30 million. It made somewhere between $10 and $21 million depending on which source you trust. Either way, a significant loss. Here's a detail that stings. Adam Sandler was originally attached to play Piven's role, but dropped out at the last minute to make The Waterboy. That film earned $186 million domestically and became one of the year's biggest hits. Very Bad Things got a D+ cinema score, one of the worst audience grades of the year, which killed any chance of word of mouth saving it. Roger Ebert's review was unusually personal. He wrote that if you find this movie funny, that tells me things about you I don't want to know. European festivals were kinder, but American audiences stayed away completely. Berg wasn't derailed, though. He went on to direct Friday Night Lights, Hancock, and Lone Survivor. Sometimes a flop is just a rough start. Eddie Murphy made one of the worst decisions of his career in 1998, and he's openly admitted it. Holy Man cost Disney $60 million. It made $27 million worldwide. That's a brutal loss for a comedy starring one of the biggest names in Hollywood. But here's the real story. Murphy was offered 2 projects simultaneously. One was Rush Hour, an action comedy where he'd team up with Jackie Chan. The other was Holy Man, where he'd wear a robe and film in Miami. In a 2025 interview, Murphy confessed, "It was a no-brainer. We went to Miami and made a horrendous film, but it was easy." Rush Hour made $244 million worldwide and launched Chris Tucker to superstardom. Holy Man opened at number 5 with $5.1 million and dropped 52% in its second weekend. The script was originally written for John Candy before his passing. Alan Rickman turned down the Jeff Goldblum role. Director Stephen Herrick had been Disney's golden boy after Mighty Ducks and 101 Dalmatians. After Holy Man flopped, he never directed for Disney again. Murphy later reflected that every bad decision he's made was based on money. At least he's honest about it. Kurt Russell spent 18 months training for Soldier. 4 hours a day in the gym. Intense physical preparation for a role where he speaks only 104 words across 85% of the film's runtime. At his $15 million salary, that works out to roughly $144,000 per word spoken. Warner Brothers gave director Paul W.S. Anderson $60 million to make this Blade Runner-adjacent sci-fi action film. It made $20 million worldwide, one of the worst returns of the year. Here's a detail that's almost too perfect. During the first week of filming, Russell broke his left ankle. The press was told it happened during a stunt. The truth, revealed years later by Anderson himself. Russell tripped over an ornamental cabbage during a break. 4 days later, he injured his right foot too. The entire production schedule had to be rearranged. They filmed scenes with Russell lying down first, then sitting, then standing, and shot the running sequences last. El Niño storms destroyed planned outdoor locations, forcing everything onto sound stages. Anderson blamed Warner Brothers' marketing for targeting teenagers instead of adult sci-fi fans. Russell later called it one that you probably don't remember. He's not wrong, but the film has developed a genuine cult following in recent years. Sometimes you're just ahead of your time. Warner Brothers wanted to compete with Disney's animation renaissance. Quest for Camelot was supposed to launch their feature animation division into the big leagues. They spent somewhere between $40 and $80 million on it, depending on whether you count production or total costs. It made $38 million worldwide. The opening weekend produced a per-theater average of $1,945, which was the worst opening for any film launching on 3,000-plus screens at the time. The production was chaos. Originally conceived as a darker, PG-13 Arthurian tale, Warner Brothers mandated it become a Disney clone with musical numbers and talking animal sidekicks. Director Bill Croyer was fired mid-production. Then came the exodus. The head of layout was kicked out, the head of background, the executive producer, the producer, multiple directors. Effects supervisor Michel Gagne recalled that people were giving up and that executives had very few concepts about animation at all. The same summer, Disney released Mulan, which grossed $304 million, 8 times what Quest for Camelot made. There's an ironic silver lining, though. The failure was so complete that Warner Brothers gave Brad Bird more creative freedom on his next project. That project was The Iron Giant, now considered one of the greatest animated films ever made. Sometimes disaster creates opportunity. Bruce Willis commanded a $20 million salary for Mercury Rising. That was 1/3 of the entire $60 million budget. Universal and Imagine Entertainment expected a solid thriller return. They got problems instead. The film made $93 million worldwide. Sounds decent until you factor in marketing costs and the theatrical revenue split. Universal was staring at losses. Here's where it gets interesting. Mercury Rising ran a $1.3 million Super Bowl ad in January 1998. Immediately before it aired, a 60-second Armageddon trailer featuring Bruce Willis played to thunderous applause. Willis was literally competing against himself, and the bigger, louder version won. The film went through 5 title changes before release, landing on Mercury Rising, a name so generic it could be slapped on any movie regardless of genre. Roger Ebert's review contained what might be his most elegant, logical takedown ever. He wrote, "If a 9-year-old kid can break your code, don't eliminate the kid, eliminate the programmers." The combined failures of Mercury Rising and Primary Colors led to 4 senior Universal executives being forced out. When your Bruce Willis thriller gets your marketing chiefs fired, something went very wrong. Not the Marvel one. This Avengers was based on the beloved 1960s British spy series starring Ralph Fiennes and Uma Thurman with Sean Connery as the villain. Warner Brothers spent $60 million on it. The result was one of the worst reviewed major releases in modern history. It made $49 million worldwide. Rotten Tomatoes, 5%. Metacritic, 12 out of 100. CinemaScore, D. The behind-the-scenes story explains everything. Director Jeremiah Chechik later revealed that one executive wanted to make the film, while another never wanted it made at all. During production, the executive who championed it was fired, and the one who opposed it got promoted to head of production. After a disastrous test screening, Warner Brothers carved 26 minutes from Chechik's cut, reducing it to an incoherent 89 minutes. They refused to screen it for critics. At the premiere, Sean Connery asked a stuntman what he thought. The stuntman diplomatically said it was okay. Connery replied, "I thought it was SHT." Rod Dreher of the New York Post called it a big fat gob of maximum crapulosity. Uma Thurman had now survived both Batman and Robin and the Avengers in consecutive years, a resilience that would have ended most careers. Chechik offered to recut the film for free. Warner Brothers declined. He didn't direct another theatrical feature for 15 years. Oprah Winfrey bought the rights to Toni Morrison's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel in 1987 for $500,000. She spent over a decade shepherding it to the screen, underwent a 24-hour simulation of historical trauma to prepare, and called it the child she nurtured and carried. Director Jonathan Demme had just won an Oscar for Silence of the Lambs. This should have been prestige gold. Budget estimates range from $53 to $80 million. It made $23 million. A devastating loss. Here's the painful irony. Beloved holds a 72% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Critics actually liked it. Roger Ebert gave it 3.5 out of 4 stars. But it opened at number 5, beaten by Practical Magic, Ants, Rush Hour, and Bride of Chucky. Oprah's summary was perfect. We got beat by something called Chucky, the 172-minute runtime limited daily showings. Demme later alleged Disney actively sabotaged the film's run, pulling theaters to make room for Adam Sandler's Waterboy. Oprah described the aftermath as the only time in her life she experienced clinical depression, saying she ate about 30 pounds of macaroni and cheese. BET's CEO warned that drawing the wrong lessons from Beloved's failure would be like saying Heaven's Gate meant Westerns don't work. But that's exactly what Hollywood concluded. Oscar-winning director Barry Levinson, Dustin Hoffman, Sharon Stone, Samuel L. Jackson. A Michael Crichton adaptation when Crichton adaptations were guaranteed money after Jurassic Park. Warner Brothers spent somewhere between $80 and $100 million on Sphere. It should have been a slam dunk. It made $73 million worldwide. Rotten Tomatoes, 12%. Here's what went wrong. The film was originally planned as Warner Brothers' Christmas 1997 tentpole, but it tested so poorly they ordered reshoots a month before opening. Both Levinson and Hoffman have stated the film was essentially unfinished when released. Warner Brothers pushed it to February, the dumping ground for film studios have given up on. In a remarkable twist, the delay created an opening for Wag the Dog, a low-budget Levinson and Hoffman collaboration shot in just 28 days. That $15 million film earned Hoffman a Best Actor nomination, and itself a Best Screenplay nomination. The quick project Levinson dashed off while waiting for his expensive film to get fixed outperformed it in every meaningful way. Rita Kempley of the Washington Post called Sphere an unfathomable chowder of recycled science fiction. She wasn't wrong. New Line Cinema had massive plans for Lost in Space. They wanted a Star Trek-style multimedia empire with animated series, live-action spin-offs, and a film trilogy. This was their most expensive production ever at $80 to $90 million. The opening weekend was genuinely impressive. It debuted at number 1 with $20.1 million, becoming the first film to dethrone Titanic from the top spot after 16 consecutive weeks. A new April opening record, then it collapsed. By the third weekend, it had dropped 44%. A 2003 court ruling explicitly confirmed the movie never broke even. The behind-the-scenes details are wild. Little Caesars Pizza signed a $20 million promotional tie-in, then backed out, prompting a $100 million lawsuit from New Line. Gary Oldman played Dr. Smith with such commitment that he stayed in character between takes, reportedly unnerving cast members. The CGI companion creature was universally mocked, described as looking like it escaped from Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Roger Ebert gave it 1.5 stars, writing that if it outgrosses the brilliant Dark City, audiences must have lost their will to be entertained. It did outgross Dark City, substantially. Netflix rebooted the franchise in 2018, completely ignoring this version existed. Here's the most extraordinary marketing disaster in cinema history. In November 1998, Lucasfilm announced the first Star Wars Episode I trailer would debut attached to only 3 films: Meet Joe Black, The Waterboy, and The Siege. This was before trailers debuted online. Thousands of fans bought tickets specifically to see those 2 minutes of footage. Meet Joe Black cost $90 million. It made $143 million worldwide. Sounds profitable until you remember studios keep roughly 50% of domestic and 33% of international. After marketing costs, Universal was drowning. Here's the thing though, those opening numbers were inflated by Star Wars fanatics who paid for tickets, watched the trailer, and walked out before Brad Pitt's 3-hour melodrama even started. Variety reported that at some screenings, 2/3 of the audience left after the trailer played. Director Martin Brest had final cut privilege and refused to trim his film. He delivered it nearly $30 million over budget. Universal chairman Casey Silver was fired 2 weeks after opening. The studio posted a $65 million quarterly loss. Pitt himself called it a low point, admitting he muffed it. Brest directed one more film, Gigsley in 2003, another catastrophic bomb, then essentially vanished from Hollywood. When Ben Affleck won the Best Picture Oscar for Argo, he thanked Brest, saying it was on the set of Gigsley that he learned to direct. Silver linings. Kevin Costner's Ego trilogy reached its catastrophic conclusion with The Postman. After Dances with Wolves won 7 Oscars and Waterworld became the most expensive film ever made, Costner directed himself in a 3-hour post-apocalyptic epic about a drifter who restores hope to America by delivering mail. He passed on the lead role in Air Force One to make this, recommending Harrison Ford in his place. Budget, $80 million. Worldwide gross, $27 million. Estimated loss, $115 million. The biggest bomb of 1998. The warning signs were everywhere. Audiences laughed and hissed at the trailer months before release. 2 separate test screenings went poorly. Costner refused Warner Bros. Appeals to cut the runtime. It opened Christmas Day at number 9 against Titanic, As Good as It Gets, and Jackie Brown. Second weekend drop, 33%. Third weekend, 68%. Gone. The Postman swept all 5 Razzie categories it was nominated for. Screenwriter Brian Helgeland won the Worst Screenplay Razzie on Saturday and the Best Adapted Screenplay Oscar for L.A. Confidential on Sunday, the same weekend, for 2 different scripts. He displayed them side by side. Roger Ebert gave it 1.5 stars, but noted it was too good-hearted for Worst of the Year. Gene Siskel coined the perfect put-down, Dances with Myself. Costner's career somehow survived. He recovered through Open Range, Yellowstone, and proving he's genuinely unkillable. 1998 proved something Hollywood didn't want to accept. No star was big enough to open a bad movie. Brad Pitt, Kevin Costner, Dustin Hoffman, Bruce Willis, Eddie Murphy, Oprah Winfrey. All of them failed to save films audiences didn't want. Warner Bros. Released 5 of the year's 8 biggest bombs while simultaneously greenlighting The Matrix, which would change cinema forever just months later. The executive casualties were staggering. Universal's chairman, 4 senior executives, marketing chiefs. MGM needed a $500 million bailout. Entire animation divisions were gutted. The era of star-driven gambling was ending. Within 2 years, The Matrix would prove you didn't need traditional movie stars to break records. You just needed a good movie. Hollywood eventually learned that lesson. It just cost them $1 billion first.